It's 5:05 and welcome into a Friday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good Friday to you. Well, we continue with additional details this morning on the horrific, tragic situation in Washington, D.C. that unfolded Wednesday night. That's when an American Airlines plane collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter just a couple of hundred feet above the ground. And we are learning details this morning that the crew on the flight were based in the Charlotte area, where American Airlines and PSA Airlines, the regional subsidiary wholly owned and operated company of American, has a lot of their crews based out of. North Carolina Governor Josh Stein offered his condolences in a social media statement yesterday, saying, quote, "My heart goes out to everyone who lost loved ones in the tragic DCA plane crash. Anna and I," that's his wife, "are praying for all involved, including the families of the Charlotte-based crew." Now, again, details from the crash are still very much up in the air. However, what we do know is that American Eagle Flight 5342 was coming in from Wichita, Kansas, when a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with the plane just some 400 feet above the ground. All 60 passengers and 4 crew members aboard the plane are believed to have been killed, along with the 3 soldiers aboard the helicopter. And while American Airlines has not yet officially reported the names of crews, we are getting comments and getting statements from various media outlets across the state and even across the country about some of these individuals, including some of the flight crew. We are learning details this morning about one of the plane's pilots in Samuel Lilly. He graduated from George Southern University back in 2018 and graduated as an airline pilot in 2020. We also are learning details about 53-year-old senior flight attendant Ian Epstein and 34-year-old flight attendant DeSayana Elder, who were also based in Charlotte Douglas. For Epstein, he was with the American Airlines subsidiary PSA for 5 years. He started back in February 2020 and apparently ranked in the top 5% nationwide in American Airlines employees that are able to sell credit cards as they leave the planes, indicating he was very good at his job. Before his airline job, he was the founder and sales director of Oak Barrel Travel in Charlotte and also worked over at Camping World for a period of time. Also killed in the crash was Wendy Schaffer, a mother of 2 young children from Charlotte. According to TV reports in the Charlotte area, her passing away was confirmed through a GoFundMe page set up by friends, which noted she leaves behind her husband and 2 children, age 3 and 1. The other pilot of the plane that was killed was a 34-year-old Jonathan Campos of Florida, and other victims have been identified. Getting us some statements in from the mayor of Charlotte, in Vi Lyle. She said, quote, "Like everyone around the country, I grieve for those who lost their lives in the tragic accident in Washington, D.C. This terrible loss will be felt deeper here in Charlotte as we learn that several of the people who perished were from the Queen City. My sympathies and prayers are with the family, friends, and colleagues of those who lost loved ones, and I ask our community to wrap our arms around our neighbors who have been impacted by these tragic events, to support them, love them, and to lift them up." A very tragic situation. You can read additional details this morning by visiting our website. It's our top story over at carolinajournal.com. It's now 5:09, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We are continuing to track hurricane recovery in eastern North Carolina this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. We're talking about Hurricanes Matthew and Florence, 2016 and 2018. There was a meeting yesterday morning in the North Carolina General Assembly going over some of those details. To get some more information this morning, Brianna Kramer, carolinajournal.com, joins us on the News Hour. Brianna, NCORR, the agency, we've talked a lot about that over the last couple of years at carolinajournal.com. Tell us a little bit, first of all, what is NCORR and what did we learn in the hearing in front of the General Assembly yesterday morning?
Yes. Hey, Nick. The Office of Recovery and Resiliency, NCORR, was created in 2018 to assist in the rebuilding process following Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. but its financial mismanagement has resulted in ongoing failures that continue today in 2025, about 7-8 years later. So though these hurricanes hit a long time ago, the eastern part of the state has still continued to struggle with organizing, building repairs, and temporary housing for the people in the region. And so state legislators had a committee meeting on Thursday where they heard from top leaders who have been behind this effort that was actually initiated by former Governor Roy Cooper. But really, they said they were left more confused after the meeting, after listening to the executives kind of go over what the status is. And it's just been such a long process. And there was a lot of frustration and a lot of anger from state legislators.
Well, and rightfully so. Of course, now we are 6 months removed from Hurricane Helene in the western half of North Carolina. And I think rightfully so, Brianna, a lot of folks are asking themselves, not only members of the General Assembly, but the general public, if the state mismanaged the eastern half of recovery over the last 6, 7, 8 years, like you're reporting, how can they possibly handle a much trickier situation in the western half of the state? Here's the real question. Where do we stand right now, rounding out the month of January, storms from 2016 and 2018? How many people are still without houses as we speak this morning?
Yeah, so it's definitely a hard balance right now for the General Assembly because they're looking ahead to Hurricane Helene and all that needs to be done in the western half of the state. But at the same time, you can't leave the people behind that are still struggling from the hurricanes many years ago on the eastern half of the state. So they're balancing two different situations at the same time and trying to move on from something that should have been taken care of a long time ago. So some of the stats, the top lines, there's over 1,000 homes still awaiting repairs from NCOR. So they've, continued to ask for funding from the General Assembly, and they continue to push forward projects, but they've struggled to with the finance aspect of it too. They had initially said that they could complete it with $265 million. That was, I think, at the end of 2024. They have come back to the General Assembly several times with deficits, asking them for more funds, with which the General Assembly did end up providing to them. Now NCOR is requesting $300 million, so $35 million more than previously requested. So really the financial aspect of this, it's just a mess. And it's really put the legislators in a difficult spot with balancing funding for Hurricane Helene. So that's on the financial side of it. And shockingly enough, there's 199 homeowners that are in temporary housing from these hurricanes 7 years ago. And so they're waiting while their homes actually still need to begin to be under construction. And so they're in temporary housing because their houses were inhabitable due to maybe mold, or they were blown away, or some other factor like that. And so they are waiting in temporary housing. So that's kind of what they heard yesterday, state legislators from Gibson. Prior Gibson, he is the director of NCOR.
And I think it's important to note, you folks might be asking themselves, who is this director? Obviously, the person leading this organization needs to go. We covered that back a couple of months ago. Prior Gibbons was brought in kind of the waning days of 2024 to take over and really kind of help with this transition with NCOR. The previous director, and Laura Hogshead, was seemingly fired by the governor right before he exited the governor's mansion. So there is new leadership in there, and I watched the hearing. You watched it as well. It seems genuine that he is got his goal and his focus set on getting these folks back in their homes. But Brianna, as we heard back and forth from members of the General Assembly, how many more times are you going to come back and ask us for more money when we still have over 1,000 individuals without homes? The frustration was very much on display yesterday in Raleigh.
Yes, that's right. And he told them that they're going to need more funding. He said that their funds are going to run out by late February or early March. Which obviously creates an urgent need for additional funding from the General Assembly, of course. So he's kind of letting them know we're going to need, $35 million more in order to complete what we said we would do for NCOR. which was the agency created to do this long ago. And so they're going to need more funds, and that's going to be urgent for the General Assembly to get to in the coming potentially weeks. And then at the same time, they are also talking about NCORP employees, and this was a concern, are they going to be moving on to help with Hurricane Helene? And Gibson said that they have 200 employees, first of all, still at NCORP, which is
crazy.
Quite a number to still have that many employees being paid. And then he also clarified that the office is not going to be attempting to shift over Corps staff to help with Hurricane Helene recovery efforts. So I think that was a relief for state legislators to hear.
I've got a couple of other questions or some other details from that meeting I want to go over. We'll continue the conversation with Brianna Kramer from the Carolina Journal coming up after this. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:16, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We'll get a look at traffic on your Friday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you.
It's 521. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Turning our attention to Washington, D.C. for just a minute here or so this morning. On Wednesday, President Donald Trump signed the Laken-Riley Act, also known as Senate Bill 5, into law, making it the first piece of legislation that he has signed since his swearing in last Monday. U.S. Senator Ted Budd, alongside Senator Katie Britt, co-sponsored the bill, which requires the Secretary of Homeland Security to take custody of illegal immigrants who have been charged in the U.S. with certain crimes. In a press release after the signing on Wednesday, Senator Budd said, quote, "The American people sent a clear message on November the 5th. It is time to return to law and order. President Trump pledged to make America safe again, and his signing of the Laken-Riley Act is another promise kept. I am grateful to have led this legislation with Senator Katie Britt, John Fetterman, and Majority Leader John Thune." So with that, the Laken-Riley Act is now in law. Of course, it was named after a nursing student who was tragically stabbed to death back on February the 22nd of 2024 while jogging at the University of Georgia campus. Jose Abrea, an undocumented migrant from Venezuela with a prior shoplifting citation from the Athens Police Department, was convicted of her murder. You can read more comments from Senator Budd as well as other North Carolina lawmakers this morning by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com, and reading the story, the headline, "Trump signs Laken-Riley Act first bill this term into law." It's now 5:22 on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Continuing our discussion this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour about yesterday's House and Senate committee hearing on NCORE, the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency. One of the chairs of the committee, Brendan Jones, had some very strong words in the hearing yesterday. Take a listen.
You personally came and took me out of the chamber, as well as Chairman Bell. You said, if you tell me to go, it's done. Did we have that conversation?
Yes, sir.
It ain't done. I mean, you give us the money, we'll do it. You come back, give us the money, we'll do it. When does it stop, Director? That's what when does this stop? We can't keep doing this. This has been one of the biggest shams on the North Carolina taxpayers that's ever taken place.
Mr. Chairman, there's been over $750 million
I'm not
spent.
saying y'all hadn't pissed money away, because you have.
I hear you. But the first state money in the HRP program was in October. $30 million, and thank you. And then $50 million in November, thank you. But in the scheme of disaster recovery, Mr. Chairman, the general rule of thumb is about 75% federal and about 15 to 20% state, and then some money on the local level. I mean, you want me to change the course of history and what's happened in the past?
You can't change the course of history, but somebody has got to be held accountable. We can't keep doing this. And you heard Senator Moffitt, Representative Gillespie. We can't afford to go through this again in the West. Something's got to change.
We're continuing our discussion this morning with Brianna Kramer on that topic. The biggest sham ever perpetrated on taxpayers in North Carolina. Some very strong words from the chairman of the committee. Is he wrong?
You know, I don't think he is wrong. I mean, this has gone on for many years on end, Nick, and the legislators here in Raleigh are fed up with having to hold these committee meetings every couple months and talk and question the exact same individuals and hear the exact same very vague answers and not get down to the bottom of it. When is this project going to be done? Even on Thursday, that was the question that Brendan Jones wanted answered, and he kept pushing that question at Gibson. When will you be done working and constructing the new homes on the eastern part of the state? And he did not give a specific answer, though he did say, as long as we get the funding that is needed for the contractors, hopefully we can get this done in about a year or so. So basically by the end of 2025 or maybe start of 2026, they hope to have it done. Although, you know, they've continued to delay and push things off. And so I think there's a lot of doubt on if that can really come to fruition.
In regards to the completion date, which of course everybody is looking at, there was some rationale given by the director and Prior Gibbons, making claims that they go through this process. There's a lot of very complicated situations where you have multiple people that own a plot of land, and old building codes are no longer relevant. You can't get septic installed. So there does appear to be a lot of potential roadblocks in the way for some of these homes. But as you noted, this agency and department didn't spin up yesterday. They've been at it now for 6-7 years in some cases, and yet here we are with still close to 1,200 individuals without homes.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely roadblocks. That's just part of disaster recovery. South Carolina, Florida, other states deal with natural disaster. Many other states, not just hurricane disasters, but a variety of natural disasters, even out in California with the wildfires. And you have to be prepared and have a plan of action for how you're going to respond, because we know that disasters are going to strike. And so you need a plan of action. And we see that South Carolina was able to handle it on their own. And then we look to North Carolina and wonder, where did things go wrong with NCORE? And is this going to be the same for GROW NC when it comes to the recovery of Hurricane Helene now, looking ahead to the future? Legislators hope that's not the case, of course. Same with Governor Josh Stein and his team. Of course, nobody wants that to be the case. But where did things go wrong is a question that needs answers and accountability.
Well, Brandon, this is even more relevant now. We heard from President Trump 1 week ago on Friday when he was in North Carolina that he's looking at making some drastic overhaul changes to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and even hinted at the fact that FEMA might become nothing more than just a pass-through agency for money, pushing all of the relief efforts to the state. That could be a major issue when we look at our past track record with this hurricane relief. If that's what North Carolina is going to have going forward, that's not going to put us in a good situation or position at all.
Yeah, that's true. There are two sides to that. In one sense, that would be great for the state to be able to dodge all of the hoops that you have to go through and the bureaucracy of the federal government and all the different requirements and the details that are needed. Because yesterday, the Committee on Hurricane Helene Recovery, they met at the General Assembly as well. And they continue to talk about all of the obstacles when it comes to FEMA and getting this funding here on the ground and getting it out. They have to go through so many different approval processes, and it sounds like it's very difficult and it's causing things to really back up. So I think in one sense, having FEMA kind of go to the back burner and giving that money directly to the state could potentially really alleviate all of the different details that are needed right now. And so that would be a benefit. But at the same time, you're right. If you don't have a proper state that is organized and prepared and has a plan of action ahead of time, of course, you're going to run into problems. And that was something that some lawmakers mentioned yesterday, is we need a plan going forward ahead of time for whenever the next hurricane comes. We can't just sit here and then scramble again, because right now that kind of seems to be what is going on.
You've got more details in your story this morning, including some various charts from some presentations and some video clips as well. Where can folks find those details this morning?
Yeah, go to carolinajournal.com to read the latest.
A great update this morning. Brianna Kramer joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:29, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We'll get a look at the roadways on this Friday morning. An update with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's 5:36, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Don't forget, if you miss any portion of the show, you can take it with you on demand by checking out the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. It's available wherever you get your shows. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour, tap the subscribe or follow button, and you'll get a new show delivered to your smartphone or tablet each and every weekday morning. It's the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. Download and subscribe now. Well, the first day of the 2025 state legislative session took place on Wednesday, and we saw when that took place dozens of bills kicking off the new year, some indicating top priorities for leadership, others reflecting more niche personal interests. One of the things that was brought forward, copying a campaign promise of Republican President Donald Trump, a bill dealing with bonuses and taxes, tips rather on taxes, was filed by Representative Harry Warren out of Rowan County. Trump said that he will push Congress to exempt overtime and tips from federal income taxes, and House Bill 11, which was filed on Wednesday, seeks to exempt bonus pay of up to $2,500, as well as overtime pay and tips from state income tax. Warren said in a statement to media, quote, "This is a common sense way to reward hardworking hourly employees who go above and beyond to support their families. It also incentivizes workers to take on extra shifts and help employers fill vacant positions." Another tax bill filed by Representative Aaron Perret out of Wake County would primarily affect those who spend sums of money on online sports betting. House Bill 14 was introduced on Wednesday, and it would allow bettors to deduct wagering losses against gambling winnings on their state taxes. However, the catch and the key here is only if they're individuals that itemize their deduction. Under current state law, someone who wins $10,000 gambling but lost another $9,000 in separate bets still has to pay taxes on the $10,000 in winnings. This bill would instead only tax the $1,000 net gain, and taxpayers would not be allowed to deduct more in losses than winnings, thus lowering their adjusted gross income. The bill would be retroactive to 2024 when North Carolina legalized sports betting, and this is not the first time the first type of tax reform has been proposed. Senate Leader Phil Berger previously said that he was not interested in changing the state law to allow deductions for gambling losses, and House Speaker Destin Hall, the speaker, said on Wednesday that he would, quote, "need to look at the pros and cons and the numbers on it." So a couple of different pieces of legislation there that could have some impact on sports betting. Representative Keith Kidwell from Beaufort County, who leads the Freedom Caucus group in the North Carolina House, filed two bills to loosen some gun laws. House Bill 5 would allow almost anyone who's 18 years or older to carry a concealed handgun in North Carolina without needing to pass a test on firearm safety or accuracy, in addition to other current requirements. You've probably heard that described before as constitutional carry. House Bill 9 would exempt shooting ranges from all local government rules or ordinances. It would also allow anyone to shoot guns on their property without dealing with issues from city or state officials, as long as they take, quote, "reasonable care to prevent a projectile from crossing the bounds of their property." There have been some issues in the last couple of years in North Carolina, specifically in regards to shooting ranges in which towns and municipalities have, for all intents and purposes, outlawed them with overburdensome regulation on the building aspect. So House Bill 9 looks like it would deal with some of those. At least two constitutional amendment proposals were also filed on Wednesday, which would be placed on the 2026 ballot for popular vote if they pass the legislature. Senator Bobby Hannigan proposed a constitutional amendment to get rid of the very long overdue racist literacy test requirement that has remained written onto the North Carolina state constitution, even though it's been unenforceably federally since the 1960s. Representative Piercy Harrison, a Democrat from Guilford County, also filed a new state constitutional amendment to ban politically motivated gerrymandering that would also be placed on the 2026 ballot. Among the dozens of other bills that were filed on Wednesday, Senate Bill 10 requires the Department of Motor Vehicle to provide mobile driver's licenses upon request starting July 1st of 2026. The legislature did approve a study for mobile licenses in 2024, so we'll see if anything happens with that. Senate Bill 20 to ban organized balloon releases, such as the kind that are sometimes associated with funerals or celebrations. Found this to be an interesting one. It does come with a fine of $250 per offense. The bill says releasing balloons in mass poses a harm to the scenic beauty of the state and a danger and nuisance to wildlife and marine life. That is Senate Bill 20 that was brought forward in the legislature as well. One of the individuals bringing that forward, Senator Woodson Bradley, a Democrat from Mecklenburg County. Looking at some other legislation, House Bill 8 would require state and local government agencies to buy recyclable materials and compostable food when possible to measure how much plastic the state uses and look into having the state partner with private sector on reducing or better recycling its plastic waste. House Bill 13 would allow the state to fine businesses up to $5,000 when they charge customers' fee for paying with a credit or debit card if the fee is higher than what the business itself has to pay to process the payment. You've probably dealt with this many times before. You go online and are trying to purchase something using a credit or debit card to see a very hefty credit card or debit card fee be associated with it. House Bill 13 looks to change some of that. And House Bill 24 finally this morning would repeal a law that was passed with little debate in the 2024 session that banned all local governments from enacting stricter zoning rules on any properties unless the property owner agrees. So a lot that we are discussing, a lot of legislation will be flying around over the next couple of months. We will keep a very close eye on those pieces of legislation and, of course, the state budget, which will have some major impacts on the state going forward. We'll be keeping track of all of that on our website, carolinajournal.com, and right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:44, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We will get a look at the roadways early on this Friday morning, an update on traffic with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks a lot, Nick. We have an incident.
It's 5:50. Good morning again. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Well, we are wrapping up a National School Choice Week across the state of North Carolina. We've been bringing you coverage all week here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. And we do have some new data out this morning on North Carolina students. And it's, well, some good news. North Carolina students have performed at or above the national average on a key assessment on math and reading. However, one of the downsides, lingering effects of COVID-19, continue to pose major challenges in closing achievement gaps, according to new data that's available from the U.S. Department of Education. The results are based on the performance of the National Assessment of Educational Progress, often called the Nation's Report Card. The test evaluates 4th and 8th grade students nationwide in core subjects such as reading and math. And while North Carolina ranked comparably to or better than its peers nationally, the testing data from 2024 highlights a troubling stagnation in North Carolina students' performance, showing no notable improvement in scale across any subject area since 2022. That's according to a news release from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Additionally, scores in 3 of the 4 tested areas continue to fall below pre-pandemic levels. Specifically, 4th grade math scores show no statistical significance between when compared to 2019, underscoring the ongoing challenge of recovering lost academic ground. Dr. Bob Lubke of the John Locke Foundation, he's the director of the Center for Effective Education. He joined us earlier this week on the show, said, quote, "You can't try and dress up or try to explain away the Nation Report Card score as much as you want. It doesn't change a fundamental fact. The scores for both tests are disappointing and fail to show the expected improvement." He says North Carolina received $6.2 billion in COVID relief funds. No less than about $1.25 billion was set aside to help address learning loss. What happened? According to these test results, COVID relief funds had little or no impact. Who is being held accountable for another failed effort to improve education? No one, and that's only the beginning of the problem. On the positive side, the percentage of students scoring at or above proficiency in both 4th and 8th grade math was up from where that number was in 2022. Looking at some of those numbers there. The state superintendent of public instruction, Mo Green, highlighted that while the pandemic has ended, its lingering effects on students remain very evident. In a statement, he pointed out that 4th graders who took part in recent assessments were kindergartners when school closed in the spring of 2020. He also noted 8th graders had just started 4th grade at the beginning of that time. Green said, quote, "These students face significant disruptions during pivotal moments in their education. Though it's disheartening to see a lack of progress, the results are consistent with trends we're observing in state end-of-grade testing. The growing achievement gap between our highest performing students and those who require additional support underscores the urgency of our work. My team and I are committed to tackling these challenges over the next 4 years to drive excellence in our public schools." Green added that the literacy test scheduled for administration in early 2024 does not accurately reflect the strides that North Carolina schools have made in literacy education since adopting the science of reading. Between 2021 and 2024, over 44,000 educators, including teachers, administrators, coaches, and others, completed the K-5 or Early Childhood Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling Professional Development Program. Recent beginning of year data from a bunch of that looked at a bunch of various indicators. It showed that North Carolina students in grades 1 through 3 outperformed their national peers. Additionally, students in grades K through 3 demonstrated consistent and steady improvements, signaling ongoing progress in early literacy. There's a lot more details as we have covered throughout the week in regards to a National School Choice Week. You can read some of those additional details this morning by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. Well, members of the General Assembly were left even more confused on yesterday morning, after hearing from two top executives in charge of disaster relief, not from Hurricane Helene, but from storms that affected the state, in some cases, almost a decade ago. Hurricanes Matthew in 2016 and Hurricanes Florence in 2018. The North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency was created in 2018 to assist in the rebuilding process following those two storms. Members of the Joint Legislative Commission on Government Operations questioned Pryor Gibbons, who is the director of NCORB, on Thursday morning about delays in the eastern half of the state. A very fiery back and forth taking place in Raleigh, well, because more than 1,100 homes are still waiting repair. Progress has stalled as NCOR halted new contracts after facing major budget deficits. NCOR has suggested that the program could be completed with $265 additional million. However, NCOR is now requesting just north of $300 million, which is about $35 million more than previously requested. Pryor Gibbons warned that the recovery efforts will run out of funds in less than a month, by late February or potentially early March, if nothing changes, creating an urgent need for additional funding from the North Carolina General Assembly. According to NCOR data, 199 homeowners are in temporary housing units while they are still waiting their homes to begin construction. Gibbons said many have been in temporary residential assistance for many months because their homes are completely uninhabitable. We've got a lot of details on NCOR, not only the meeting that took place on yesterday morning, I should say, but as we go back a couple of months and years, a whole bunch of details this morning on our website, carolinajournal.com. Well, that's going to do it for a Friday edition. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back with you Monday morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.